Hey, hi, hello, welcome back. Alexandrian Codex, Hearts of Iron 4, Kaiserreich, Commonwealth of America. We're doing a little bit of a Sitzkrieg right now. The rest of the world is on fire, but not us. I'm loving it. Liberated slaves, but Jim Crow still exists. Ah, shit. Here we go again. Yeah, essentially. And some efforts were undertaken to curtail racial violence in the South at that time, but not enough. Yeah, the 2020 elections. Listen, I'm not voting for Joe Biden, but I hope that he wins. I hope that he wins because the alternative is in many ways worse. But okay, it's a toss-up. Biden wins. Some progressive reforms could get pushed through, like a $15 minimum wage, forgiveness of student loans, that sort of thing. Though it's ironic because Biden is the reason that I can't get my student loans forgiven, though I don't really believe he'll do any of the things he says he's going to do. Trump, on the other hand, is just going to keep doing what he's doing and running this country straight into a kleptocracy, which is bad, right? It's bad, but it's offensive. It's offensive and it is shaking up this country. Imagine if Hillary had won in 2016. Things would be a little bit better than they are now, but only like a little bit. And there probably would only be kind of moderate and substantial changes to a lot of systems. But because we have this abhorrent figure in office, this terrifying specter of fascism hanging over us, more and more people are becoming radicalized. More and more people are waking up to the fact that the American dream was nothing more than an opium inspired hallucination, was nothing more than a lie. That the real American dream is something that we have to work for and that won't be handed to us by corporate elites, by the wealthy. So, in that respect, some important counter movements have been really driven into action since 2016. Organizations like the Democratic States of America, Democratic Socialists of America, have been booming. Membership has been booming in response to the Trump administration and the Democratic Party's utter failure to check it. If Biden were to win, a lot of that outrage would be subdued. Things would continue getting worse in a lot of ways, but we'd be getting breadcrumbs, right? We'd be getting band-aids and breadcrumbs for a lot of social issues, for a lot of the problems of capitalism, and that would be enough for some people to not be outraged. That would be enough for some people to be like, well, it's not perfect, but we're moving in the right direction. It's the way that the United States has combated socialism throughout the 20th century is through these weak ass little small gestures. But yeah, I don't think Joe's gonna win. I think he's a rapist and I think he's insanely unpopular. None of his platforms exist, really. If you ask people voting for Joe Biden why they're voting for Joe Biden, they say we have to beat Trump. Or that Joe is the best candidate who has the best chance of winning. Those aren't policies. Those aren't platforms. And then if you ask these same people who are harassing progressives and demanding to know why we're not voting for Joe or why we don't support him, if you ask them, hey, well, okay, how many doors have you knocked on? How many calls have you made for Joe Biden? How much have you donated to his campaign? They'll say none. They'll say none and then act like it's some straw man argument. These fucking liberals cannot organize for the life of them. So, I don't know. I'm of two minds about it. It's fucked and it's gonna get worse, or it's fucked and maybe we can stop it from getting much worse, but then that'll just justify the system that we have and slow the inevitable revolution. I mean, they're both bad. They're both bad. I wanted Bernie Sanders. I still do. Because while that would justify and embolden the system as like, hey, it actually works. Maybe we don't need to undertake collective action to manifest significant change in this country. It still would have saved thousands of lives within a year. And yeah. Yeah, and enjoy my uh, rambling. I know what I'm saying is not news to a lot of people, and it's not brain fart. It's not revolutionary to be. Well, it sort of is in a way, but it's not that different than what a lot of other folks are saying right now. But yeah, Biden has severely fucked up. It's almost 1940. Okay, let's look at 1940 text. Nothing in here we haven't already researched. We could start looking into this, but I'm not ready to do that yet. Yeah, we're already doing that. Yeah, we're already doing that. I could go into that. 1940, let's get better airplanes. Curtiss P-40 Warhawk. The pace of fighter advancements is astounding, and as such, we must continue to incorporate technology as well as improve upon existing concepts. A new fighter design must be capable of high speed, high performance at altitude, and the best range possible. Additionally, it must be very well armed. Yeah, Trump has done a lot of damage to this country. I don't think anyone's arguing against that. I just. They're members of the same social class. They're members of the same facet of society, and they work for the same people, corporations. Joe Biden, if you look at his legislative history, he has consistently favored rampantly conservative values and rampantly pro-corporate values. He's been anti-gay marriage. He's been anti-gay rights. He's been against the right of a woman to choose if she wants to undertake abortion or something like that. He's attacked equal rights and racial rights movements in this country. He's rolled back our abilities to get student loans at reasonable rates. He's rolled back our ability to declare bankruptcy on student loans if we're unable to pay them. He's done obscene amounts of damage to this country and to the people here. So I don't think he's earned the presidency. I really don't. Trump didn't either. Trump just threw the right money and used the right kind of populist arguments to fire up people on the right who feel like they're not being represented. And what you need to beat a populist is a fucking populist. You don't need a moderate to beat a populist. A moderate will never beat a populist. Oh, dude, Biden. Look back at Biden's voting record when it comes to oh god, the here we go. God, what is the word I'm wanting? There's a word I'm wanting and I'm totally forgetting. Yeah, he opposed school desegregation, for example, and there's other things like this. He opposed forced busing in school segregation or school desegregation. Back in what? Yeah, he represented Delaware from 73 to 2009. Delaware is a United States tax haven. He is a massive corporate candidate. He has represented insurance industries and credit card industries through his entire tenure in the Senate, and that's what he's going to continue to do. 1939 World Series of Baseball is here. With the first World Series since the Revolution and attendance is high. 7 games of baseball over 6 days. The Cincinnati Reds fought the Detroit Tigers. The games are extremely close, so the final game is anyone's guess. And the winner is... Drumroll, please. Go ahead and do that. Go ahead and upgrade this artillery. Most moderate candidates do not have good voting histories. And I mean, I'm not even talking about Joe Biden's inappropriate touching, sexual abuse, alleged rape, anything like that. I'm just talking about his voting history and like what Supreme Court candidates he's backed, the fact that he's been incredibly resistant on any sort of progressivism for the entirety of his time in office. No, insurance companies are terrible. Insurance companies are by and large, terrible industries. Um, they are made to profit off of you. Insurance industries in the United States are not there to protect you. They are there to profit off of you. You would be better served by taking the amount of money you give to an insurance industry or insurer and putting it in a savings account or not spending it. And by the time something happens, you're very, very likely to have enough money to cover it. Insurance is the insurance industry in the United States is a for-profit industry. It's not a non-for-profit. It is not a non-profit. It is not a service industry. It is a for-profit industry. The bottom line of that industry is taking as much blood out of a stone as possible and giving as little back. It is a dystopian and inhumane industry that is built on the guise of being there to help you, but they are not there to help you. They are there to do the bare minimum and trick you into paying for as long as you're profitable to keep it as a client. And then as soon as you start needing returns on the services, as soon as you start needing car insurance because you got in an accident, well, your rates have got to go up. Oh, wow, you got sick, your rates are going to go up. Oh, you got a pre-existing condition, rates are going to go up. It has no vested interest in human welfare. Its only vested interest, and this goes for any insurance company in the US, is in profit. And that is fucking disgusting. So yeah, they help sometimes, in as much as if they didn't exist, people would have nothing, but they're also leeches. And we could have a country where everyone is covered by a shared insurance program under the federal government. We could have a country where housing is a human right, where having access to food and education and healthcare are human rights, unalienable human rights. We do not need corporations to perform these services. We never did, and it's just stupid thinking otherwise. I'm not trying to punch down or talk down here. It's just I grew up. My mom worked in the insurance industry and the banking industry. She's an incredibly intelligent woman. She grew up in Brazil under, obviously dictatorship at the time when she was growing up. And when she came back to the United States, she got an education in finances, and she worked for all sorts of different insurance industries and major banking corporations. She would stay in most of these institutions for about 3 years, because in 3 years she typically got high enough in the hierarchy that she could deconstruct the ways that those industries were taking advantage of people. And so she would quit, move on to a new business, a new adjacent industry, or a competitor that seemed like it was better for people. But on the whole, across the board, they are disgusting institutions. Anyhow, the Reds have won the game. The final game was close, but Ernie Lombardi scored the final home run of the final inning, securing the win for the Cincinnati Reds, making it so that they won the 1939 World Series. Yeah, that's incredibly stupid. Your car getting stolen and your rates going up even though you found your car, that's so stupid. That's not your fault. But as far as the insurance industry is concerned, well, it's your fault for living in the place that you do, and, well, it's happened once, so it's likely to happen again, and, well, we just can't take that liability. Yeah, when people cross the Mexican border because the American healthcare outweighs the ridiculous prices, you know something is wrong. Yeah, there's a lot wrong with this country. When people spend money going with healthcare tourism to Spain or Portugal or other parts of the world, and it's cheaper to fly over, stay in a fucking resort, get the treatment you need, and then fly back than it is to go and get treatment at a local hospital here in the US, things are very, very wrong. So I'm not a fan of compromise in any way when it comes to Medicare for all, or universal basic income, or universal housing, or anything else. The compromise is just totally unacceptable. Said insurance is bad because statistically you won't need it based off of what you pay into it, then paid by taxes. When the money put in the single payer be better used by having that money kept by the people? Maybe. No. But maybe. I can see an argument for yes. I can understand the underlying logic of libertarianism. I don't share the philosophy, but I can understand it. As far as I'm concerned, it is better to have, let's just say the analogy here is that the federal government is a universal savings account. We all put our money into it based on the understanding that if my neighbor gets sick, that they'll be taken care of. That if someone needs help, our community agrees to help people who need help. And that's why we have this shared savings account, basically. That's not exactly what it is, but that's why I'm in favor of taxation and federal and state services. I don't want it to be up to a for-profit committee. I don't want it to be up to the whims of the financial elite, who lives and who dies and who gets help and who doesn't. That's terrifying to me. That's absolutely terrifying to me. And the nonprofit industries in the United States make up for the vast majority of social welfare in this country, in terms of financial value. And they are, in some ways, highly efficient at what they do, but it should not be up to, well, you get to live because I feel like it. It should be the underlining pinning of our society is that we care about each other and we want each other to live. Destroy the loyalist terrorists. These events we're going to have to go through a few times to get rid of these annoying terrorist events and to get those negative modifiers down. I think you have to do it 4 times, and it takes better part of a year or a year and a half to finally get rid of it. Well, hello. Well, it certainly depends. Sometimes private options are better in certain ways than public options. Private options, it really depends on the funding. Like here in the United States, I've been under both public and private healthcare, and they've both been terrible. They've both been absolutely terrible, because they're built on the foundation of the norm being privatized healthcare. Yeah, yeah. There are definitely examples of. I don't want to defame or in any way downplay the accomplishments of the medical care workers who work within our healthcare system. Absolutely not. There are doctors and nurses that do incredible, amazing, life-saving work every single day. And now some of them, a very slim minority, are in it for the money, but the vast majority of healthcare workers in the United States and across the world are in it because they genuinely care about their fellow human beings. Yeah. I it the public care here in the United States, in Massachusetts and Washington particularly, I'm familiar with. They do an okay job, but basically, what they are private healthcare purchased for you by the state, which leans into their inefficiency and how much they don't cover and how much they try to get out of. But it really varies. I know for some things, oh my god, I forget the name of the healthcare system in the UK. Some things in the UK are really great to get treated for. But I know that if you're a trans person looking to start transitioning, that the healthcare system in the United Kingdom fucking blows and is very difficult to navigate. I know if you are trans in Germany, it's insanely difficult to navigate, and a lot of trans people from Europe come to the United States because we're so for profit motivated. You can typically find a doctor or insurer who will let you transition and help you transition a lot faster. So there are some things that undeniably privatized healthcare in the United States takes care of very well. Privatized healthcare treats individuals efficiently. They do not treat societies efficiently. So I believe there's probably a world where they can coexist. That there is a bare minimum, there's a baseline that is competent, that is humane, that has the public interest in mind. And then if you want to go above and beyond that for optional procedures, if you want to expedite procedures, if yada yada yada, maybe you can pay on top of that. I don't know. There might be some sort of compromise there. Yeah. it's in Japan, they both have public and private healthcare. 90% have private because the public ones suck. Well, yeah. And then you look at how Japan's doing with COVID-19, and it's bad. It's really bad. Korea has public healthcare primarily, and they're doing amazingly, or public healthcare in Korea, and they're doing amazingly. The thing that is being very demonstrated in the pandemic that we're experiencing now is while private institutions are very geared and very angled towards treating individuals with deep pockets very well, or individuals that they can put in debt or get credit from very well, when it comes to treating everybody, they do a terrible job. Who won? Who won down here? It's the pro-Germans have won. Albania's capitulated. I didn't even know Albania was at war. Yeah. South Korea would not be my ideal for anything. South Korea's... it's got some problems. My ideal for healthcare would be... here we fucking go. Here we are. Oh, Mexico declared war on me. Alright. Okay. Well... Mexico we go, boys. My ideal is closer to how efficiently Vietnam, for example, has tackled this crisis.
Ready.
Okay, where are you located? Okay, you're over here. Fastest trip for you would be, you get here.
Commands.
You are over here. Let's throw you on the Texas border.
Ready.
You're one step over, so let's give you Arizona, New Mexico.
Ready to move.
You're one step over here, so let's give you New Mexico, Texas up to there, and you are right here. God, I don't know. Let's focus you here. Alright, your goal is to... I mean, everyone's goal is the same here. Let's look at the, metrics for this war before I unpause, but I think we're gonna do fine.
All in.
Sorry, I don't mean to jump away from chat, and I know I haven't been doing the best job at reading your responses. And I know I have a tendency to be a little preachy. I'm very interested in reading other perspectives than my own, and hearing other perspectives than my own. I think that there's a lot of validity, there's a lot of very strong logic and reasoning to the various systems and institutions that we have had historically and that we have now.
Listen up.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, right? By what metric should we measure the effectivity of a healthcare system? Right? Should it be how well individuals are cared for? Should it be how well everyone is cared for? Should it be measured in infant mortality rate? Should it be measured in how many people die during a pandemic? Should it be measured in et cetera, right? These are complicated questions, and obviously none of us are healthcare professionals here, so far as I'm aware, and yeah, the levels of corporate loyalty and corporatism in South Korea and Japan terrify me. They're imports from the United States, and they are not great. Oh shit, I said let's take a look at the statistics, and then I immediately unpaused. Well, let's look at it now. Now, Mexico thought that they could attack me. Why? They're already at war with the Central American Confederation. Yeah, let's call it Cuba. Why not? Hey, little buddy, get in here with your 6 divisions. They have 22 to 44 divisions. They have 200k manpower. They're gonna get wrecked. Hmm. That's cool. I have a few friends who are lawyers. I'm having to think about it. I can't remember if they've passed the bar exam or
All
not.
in.
I know a couple have. I know I am friends with a couple of lawyers. I went to school with a lot of people studying law. COVID-19, only time I'm glad to be a teacher. Yeah, I I would have a job right now if I wanted to, but I did not want to. The idea that my employer considered being a concierge an essential function was terrifying me.
Vance.
Hey, you know what? Just aggressively attack. We outnumber them 5 to 1. Well, at least 2 to 1. Just roll over them. Okay, I don't have to attack Mexico. They attacked me. What nation would be your example of how you want the U.S. healthcare to be? Now, I don't know. It's a great question. I'm not sure. The Canadian healthcare system is okay up to a point, but it's still pretty influenced by America, and it still has some pretty big flaws in it, right? Like dental care, for example, and I think it would be a step up, right? It'd be a step in the right direction. I don't think any Cuba. Cuba does really well, actually. Cuba would be a great healthcare example of what I want. Having an obscene amount of doctors, a surplus amount of doctors, so that they can deal with a crisis or an epidemic, and then also send people to help other people. I think Cuba might be my example. Cuba is my platonic ideal for what a healthcare system should look like. But of course, I'm saying this as an outsider. Under I've never lived in Cuba. I've never experienced their healthcare system. Yeah, there are no private institutions in Cuba at all. It can do some high-end things, but there's a lot to be said for the motivating factor of profit in driving innovation. And it's very hard to address that, right? For a lot of high-end medical care, the United States is pushing a lot of boundaries. But I think that that flaw in the Cuban healthcare industry comes down to, well, not really an industry. The Cuban ability to provide healthcare comes down to the GDP of Cuba and how much money is being put into it. You look into how much money is put into private institutions in the United States and compare them to a small nation like Cuba, it's an incredible similarity. But if you look at a GDP like that of the United States and scale up the healthcare system that a country like Vietnam or Cuba has, and imagine, well, okay, with this kind of a budget, what could you do? I don't honestly believe that we would see much of a decrease in high-end medical care. I really think that human beings want to care for each other and are vested in helping each other. And the people really pushing these frontiers and new medicines and new treatments and new cures are people who are not doing it out of this idea that they'll make money off of it. Like there's some argument for profit driving being a motivation in innovation, but also there's not, because if you look at the United States and the innovations we've made, and then the innovations we've stolen from other people, like Edison, for example. Edison invented like 2 things, but stole damn near everything else. It comes down to having the backing, the financial backing. You look at all the innovations undertaken and accomplished by the Soviet Union, they're fucking astounding there for quite a while. And yeah, they petered out after a while. If you look at Nazi Germany and the amount of technical innovation they undertook, I mean that's really the extreme of the capitalist system. Yeah, you can have leaps and bounds if you discard the human value and human cost of innovation, but I don't think it's worth it at a certain point. Essentialize, and I don't mean to Godwin's law you. It's just, in my mind, these are extremes of philosophy. A centralized fire control system allows for all calls for artillery support to be evaluated in one location, and if needed, an entire division's firepower to be concentrated on a target, rather than a unit only being able to request fire from the artillery assigned to them. Better artillery, better infantry, yes. Yeah, a lot of cancer treatments are coming out of Cuba. A lot of treatments, successful treatments for COVID-19 are coming out of Cuba right now. Stone Mountain, Georgia. Oh, yeah. Within the deep south of Stone Mountain lies a massive bas-relief carving of 3 Confederate figures, Jefferson Davis, Robert E. Lee, and Stonewall Jackson. The site was also the rebirth of the Ku Klux Klan. Many wish for it to remove it as such a blight, especially as other monuments to the Confederacy are torn down. Man, if only we'd do that today. However, people are divided as to what should be done with the relief. Some believe it should be destroyed. James Ford, a cynical turn, wishes to chisel down the Confederates and replace them with Jemmy, John Brown, George Padmore, these being the leaders of the African American emancipation he believes best inspire new America. Diego Rivera, an artist behind the renovation of Rockefeller Plaza, suggests a cheap and honorable compromise. Relief is to be re-chiseled down to replace the Confederates with the leaders of the Socialist Revolution, Marx, Lenin, and John Reed. So destroying it would give us stability, cost us political power. Showing heroes of the emancipation would give us political power, and showing the history of socialism would give us political power. I'm going to say histories of the emancipation. Heroes of the emancipation, rather. Cuba isn't the scientific center of the world, just largely due to a lack of funding. I mean, Cuba has a population of, what, like, several million? 11 million. Yeah. When you start looking at, this is a super fascinating thing in sociology and anthropology and history. When you start looking at the number of people you need to support one scientist in a society, it's actually quite big. It's actually quite large. I think it's something like 100. And I'm probably wrong about this. It depends on your level of industrial development, but you need a lot of people to support one intellectual, one academic, one engineer, one doctor. You need people making clothes. You need people making food. You need people moving the clothes, and working to distribute the food and the clothes, and people doing housing and construction and upkeeping infrastructure, and you need all of these other people in the society in order to make this role possible. So if you have a small population, the majority of that population is going to be disproportionately, compared to other countries, disproportionately working in agriculture. And then if you get a large enough population, like we're seeing with China, especially if you super well educate them, you start running into a problem where you can support a lot of doctors and a lot of engineers and a lot of scientists. And China's rapidly catching up to the developed world. Is it suspicious a country with the most for-profit system has most medical innovation? Oh, absolutely not. Not suspicious at all. It definitely seems like a direct result, right? It's not just our country that is capitalist. It's our planet that's capitalist. It's because the United States exerts its social and economic influence across the globe that these values are shared and adhered to by other peoples in other countries. If they didn't, if they weren't impacted by it, then maybe ideas would flourish elsewhere. And they do. They do. Here in the United States, we're very egocentric and we have blinders on, right? But because we live in a system where financial prosperity is the best means of survival, well, it's a hell of an incentive to go for the highest bidder. Yeah, there's a lot of great research and great work being done in the United States. Absolutely. I would not argue against that. There are some amazing people working in the medical field. My problem is largely with the insurance industry. My issue is largely in the idea that you should take care of people because it profits you and benefits you financially. I think we should take care of people because we're taking care of people. And that a society that values its members and cares about its neighbors is a better society than one that doesn't, just intrinsically. And this isn't some new age idea. If you look back in the fossil record, and I love this, some of the first signs of organized human activity, if you look at the skeletal remains and fossil remains of human beings, some of the first signs of social organization are people who were disabled, horribly crippled, maimed, and were able to survive for years, decades after they should have died, where they were no longer productive members of society. They couldn't grow anything, they couldn't hunt, they couldn't gather. All they could really do was sit around. I'm talking about people who were had injuries that would have made them paraplegic, or people who would have been functionally blind or had other serious debilitating conditions. We have fossil records of members of these tribal communities being kept alive and extending their lifespans by orders of magnitude more than we would expect in a self-interested society. Fundamentally, to our core, we human beings care about each other, and we will care about each other. Trial of the America First Party. With the revolution over, the time now comes to deal with those that fought against us. Huey Long, so according to Earl Browder, could have been a great ally to socialism. We do admit Long's plan for welfare was in the right direction, but his authoritarian practice was abhorrent. So Long's family and close associates are now in exile. We'll have to make do with putting the leaders that remain in chains. Francis Townsend has defended the actions of the AFP's core membership, saying radical militarism was due to the nature of Southern populism, not Huey Longism. Some in the jury have been swayed, but the final decision is to, you must convict. The glove fits. Yeah. No one should ever be in a position where they can't get the medical care they need because they're afraid of not being able to afford it. No one. The value of a human life is paramount. Really, it's paramount. And if that is not a core value that we hold at the heart of our society, if there is a limit to our generosity, a limit to our compassion, that is a failing. The gains made by some earlier designs in extending underwater range, speed, and overall abilities led to a turn in submarine development away from cruiser types and back towards vessels with a greater emphasis on underwater capabilities. Vastly improved over earlier types, these submarines carried potent payloads of torpedoes and were a legitimate threat to almost all surface ships. However, they were still limited in submerged duration, range, speed, and remained vulnerable when surfaced, particularly to aircraft. No, it wouldn't. The medical community would not slow to a halt if personal profit were taken out of consideration. Personal profit was not a consideration for thousands of years in people innovating medical treatments. Like, the first eye surgeries were not done for profit. The first glasses were not invented for profit. The first innovations in the USSR, and there were a lot of medical innovations in the USSR, had absolutely nothing to do with profit. That's just silver lining here in the United States. If you talk to doctors, they're not going to say, I'm in it for the money. Now, some people may, but they're probably not the people working to innovate. They're probably the people working to bill and administrate. Well, just because something is paid for does not mean that it was done for profit. The difference being something having a value and being exchanged for something that has value in return is not capitalism. That's just trade, barter, exchange. Capitalism and the profit first underpinning of our medical system is that we charge people more for the services than those services are worth in order to generate a profit. We charge more for insurance than that insurance pays out in order to generate a profit. That's the problem. The problem is not people being paid to do a service. People should be paid to perform a service. Not the United States has made a lot of progress medically, but it's also greatly failed in a lot of ways medically. I mean, it's very hard to look at how things are going right now, today, this week, this month, this year,
Move out!
and look at the United States as any sort of medical leader. I mean, for fuck's sake, we have in the last week found that a doctor in Texas was administering drugs that the FDA did not say should be used to treat COVID-19 and are still undergoing trial testing and just used it on people without their knowledge or consent. It is incredibly fucked. I think Venezuela won. They did. Strong Venezuela. I have family members who work in the various medical fields. Like I said, I'm not divorced from the insurance industry either. My family's been greatly involved with them as well. First pair of glasses. Let's see if I can remember. Now glasses are often improperly accredited to Benjamin Franklin here in the United States. He just invented bifocals, which are pretty cool, but yeah, glasses, innovation, invention. First eyeglasses made in northern Italy, most likely in Pisa, around 1290. And yeah, I mean, it cost materials to make them, but it was not done with the interest of, ooh, how do I make money off of this? You know, I'm going to invent this way to get people back sight. Not because I want to give people back sight, but because I want to get rich off it. People who aren't sociopaths do not think that way. The fall of Mexico City. Mexico City, the oldest capital in North America and the 5th largest by population, fell today by invading American forces, who encircled the city and then moved to the lake bed from the west, cutting major transportation arteries through lower areas and forcing Mexican defenders to bleed off into the foothills of the east. As of today, the general in charge of the American occupation was sighted entering the National Palace to negotiate with the governor for a ceasefire. Rumors claim American troops are touring old Aztec ruins and picking up free souvenirs for themselves. Now it looks like survivors of Spanish tyranny will learn to live under the yoke of American control. I would very much like to
Move out!
live in a world where people aren't dying regularly because they're afraid of how expensive insulin is. Or where cancer treatment isn't something that bankrupts people. It's stupid. It shouldn't be a thing. The doctor in Texas is not anecdotal. It's a symptom of a sick system. You can say that experiments done by Nazi doctors in internment camps was anecdotal, because not all of them did it. No. U.S. trilogy by John D. Passos. Film montage, modernist writing, and socialist spirit come together in John D. Passos' new book, USA. The story itself is an examination to 12 Americans that lived through the Depression and Revolution. Passos' writing combines snippets of newspapers, propaganda, and conversations he calls on the streets during terrifying months before liberation. Such an unorthodox and creative writing is usually praised by Americans' Writers' Congress, but they've remained silent. This is due to the book's depiction of illegal killings that took place in America during the Civil War by our soldiers. De Passos has defended his inclusion, saying that the truth in art he shows it must still exist even if it is bleak. To the nominal leader of the Writers' Congress, Ernest Hemingway, this book amounted to treason and sedition against the socialist government. However, his decision to censor the book and detain De Passos was overruled by the Congress. Calm Hemingway down. Listen, the United States has tested has tested cures for syphilis on unwitting, unknowing African American populations. Like this is historical fact. We've taken vaccines and treatments to third world countries and tested them there to get around our limitations here in the United States enacted by law. These are not anecdotes that are sporadic. These are symptoms of a very sick for-profit industry that values profit over human welfare and over human suffering. It's not one odd case or two odd cases. It's time and time again that capitalists and investors and financiers find ways to take shortcuts in the form of human lives and human health in order to generate a profit. Yeah, that was in the 60s. The laws have not substantially changed since the 60s. I mean, Christ knows what's going on now that we don't know about.
Orders.
And that's not some conspiratorial nonsense. That's just... it's just appreciating that, if anything, the laws favoring institutional
Move out.
healthcare, for-profit healthcare,
Yes, sir.
and enshrining
Move out.
corporations as citizens, as people,
Attention.
have only gotten more in favor of corporations since the 1960s, and since the 80s particularly.
Commands.
The FDA has been, even in the last 3-4 years during the Trump administration, massively underfunded, massively had its programs curtailed, which some are claiming has led and contributed to the ongoing pandemic right now, and there's an argument for that, but really we haven't been prepared for this pandemic for
Orders.
ever. We've had medical professionals saying something like this is coming for years and years and years. Oh, the pandemic was not caused by the Communist Party of China. It was suppressed, absolutely. But we had an watchdog organization. It was a section of the CDC that was headquartered in China. And their job was to look out for this exact sort of thing. It had been there in place for almost 10 years. They had done amazing work in predicting and realizing when prior related diseases to COVID-19, SARS, for example, broke out in China, and predicting when they would reach the US, and were able to undertake measures to prevent the spread to the United States. Nobody created this disease. Mammal to mammal viral transmission is very, very common in the natural world, particularly when you have a carnivorous species like us preying on others. If you look in the fossil and material records and history for human beings, we used to have so many fucking parasites and viruses. It's only been within the last couple hundred years, really last 100 years, that human beings have been relatively free of foreign bodies. They didn't create the pandemic. We created the pandemic. And every other country has created the pandemic. They tried to control it. They tried to limit it. But no, the cause of the pandemic is a virulent disease that is largely asymptomatic and spreads very rapidly and takes 2 weeks to develop symptoms. These are all, any one of those things would make this hard to clamp down on. All three of them, pretty bad. The interconnectedness of our global society is a massive contributor as well. We don't really control movement across countries. And when we do, even if we say, well, you can't come to the US from China, well, then China will just go to India, then to the United States, or something like that. The lack of worldwide structures to address these sorts of things is a contributing factor. The lack of existing federal structures to address this sort of thing, to enact rent freezes, to set up food programs, to really quarantine people, That's a failure of every nation that's failed to enact those things. You have Vietnam, South Korea that are doing amazing at tackling things. They're doing fairly well at treating things. China's, by and large, done an okay job. It's not on them. The Spanish flu of 1916 did not come from Spain, it came from Kansas. This is not the first pandemic that we've been largely responsible for. With the revolution, one of the changes that has come is a transformation in the terms of vaccinations. Oh, how fitting. Oh, vacations. Wow, no, my brain's just... the workers of America rarely got to enjoy all the luxuries that were created, and progressives would say belong to the people. How many of the struggling masses got to enjoy picnics, or visiting national parks when they had to work as many hours just to survive and feed their children? No longer will this be the case. Various local unions across the country, regardless of which federation they belong to, have begun to take over and manage various cultural centers, as well as sponsor vacations. This is supported by the government at a local level and a national level as a way of boosting productivity and to encourage comradeship. Not everyone is at fault for this. No one is particularly at fault, but there are people in the American media and American government saying that we should sue China for this. That's absurd. That's absolutely absurd, and also, like, incredibly stupid. No one is individually responsible for a disease unless it is created. In all likelihood, this disease spread from a pangolin or a bat or, like, who the fuck knows? It just happens. It just happens, and it's nobody's fault. The reaction of governments, the methods and quality of treatment, the response to the crisis, now those you can ascribe fault to. China shut down its fucking borders and quarantined the city immediately. Well, not immediately. They tried to cover it up for about a month, and then they clamped down fucking hard on affected areas. They built hospitals overnight and did some incredible, incredible work. Now, of course, this is only what we're hearing through the velvet curtain, if you will. But here in the United States, we denied it for a long time, and still federally have not taken unilateral action. It's still individual states making up their own minds, even trying to decide when we come back from this. Yeah, it took the better part of a month. And like the individual, the doctor who first identified COVID-19 as being a thing, was absolutely told by Chinese officials not to report it. And threatened his life, and then he ended up dying from the disease. I'm not a mouse. I don't think China is perfect. Really, I don't hold very many romantic values for China. It's an amazing country, beautiful culture, fantastic, wonderful language, philosophy, history, sociology. There's a lot to learn there, and a lot to be celebrated. But no, I'm not a fan of any form of dictatorial hierarchy. Yeah, they did more than that. They made a lot of... Well, you know, it's hard to say. We're both outsiders, right? Neither of us are part of the CCCP. CCP? CCCP? CCP. It's very hard to say what actions were and were not undertaken. Because we weren't fucking there, right? But it does seem like people were mobilized. Eventually. Maybe too late. Certainly. There are arguments for that. But imagine, if you will, that this disease started in the United States. Attention. No, we would not have shut down a city. We would not have shut down a state. We would not have quarantined a city. We're not even doing that now. We're just trying and hoping that it goes away, essentially. We're just closing our eyes and locking ourselves up and just trying to wait it out. It's just sad. Well, no, you are not in quarantine. You do not have the military outside of your city preventing people from coming in and out, unless you live in a very specific part of New York City, in which case, you're right, you are in quarantine. What you are practicing social distancing by recommendation of state authority. However, within your city, I absolutely guarantee that there are non-essential services designated as essential services still running. Restaurants are still open making deliveries. That's unnecessary. The state could step in and take care of that and put far less people at risk. There are... Home Depot is staying open, for fuck's sake. It took how long for Hobby Lobby to close down? GameStop didn't close down for like a month and a half? Okay, yeah, California. We have the same essential services list that you're using up here in Seattle, and a lot of it's bullshit. If you read through it, a lot of services indicated as essential are absolutely not. Neither you nor I are under quarantine. We are under something that looks a lot like quarantine, but it's not being enforced by the National Guard or the CDC or the FEMA. And thank God it's not being enforced by FEMA, but it's not the same thing. It's close, and trust me, I'm really thankful that we're doing anything about it, but it's... Between California and Washington, we're doing okay, but if you look at the East Coast, holy fuck. It's not great, particularly in the Midwest. There are still states that are refusing any kind of stay-at-home order. The crime of the guilty nation seems to have been washed away, even if it took blood and fire to break the old system. We brought to bring a new birth to a new world from the ashes of the old, land of free, equal, and prosperous laborers. What is this gonna do? Boost stability, give political power. Okay, that's good. And stability. Great, yeah. All good things. Yeah, I have family in California. I have family in California that work in medical industries.
Hands.
In medical regulation industries, particularly. Oh yeah, no, I am not a, I'm not a Maoist, I'm not a Stalinist, so the USSR, in my mind, is an embarrassing failure. China, man, it's had some moments, and it does some things really well, but on the whole, it's compromises with capitalism have created a real hierarchy that are quite disturbing. Even before that, the cult of personality around Mao is incredibly dark. Vietnam, on the other hand, not a dictatorship, my dude. Not a dictatorship. Venezuela was actually doing a lot of things right despite constant US intervention. No, it didn't kill many people more than fascism. It killed more, but not like orders of magnitude more. So part of that, when people talk about the number of people killed in the USSR, so Stalin killed a ton of people, no doubt. But a big part of the statistics that are thrown around in history books is the famine in the Ukraine around the founding of the USSR. In the West, we like to blame the USSR for this famine. But the reality is famines were already undergoing underneath the Tsarist regime and had already been killing people for a long time. Now, there's certainly a case to be made for, well, why didn't the Soviet government address this more quickly, more adequately? And these are valid questions. The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle, that it was ignored because there were other areas they wanted to prioritize. Venezuela failed because of constant United States interference. Come on, you can't, if you just read about the last 30 years of Venezuelan history. We have fucked Venezuela over and over and over and over. Covertly, overtly, economically, politically, militarily. We've interfered with, every time there has been in the Americas a government that is socialist, that has any sort of semblance of success, we immediately have tried to shut it down. Cuba is a wonderful example of what happens if you just leave it alone. And, let it run its course. Castro was an egomaniac, absolutely, but yeah, I think we're the baddies here. We are absolutely the baddies here. It's May, so we're not that close to next year. Let's do magnetic detonators. New detonator detects a shift in an Earth's magnetic field when the torpedo passes under a target. An explosion directly under a ship causes much more damage and often breaks the keel of the target, sinking it instantly. Who this? New phone. Ah, destroy the loyalist. Yes. Yeah. The reason why so much of it being tied up in oil goes to the prior administrations. The administrations put into place and reinforced by the Americans. The most recent socialist government in Venezuela was talking about getting away from oil as their mainstay. Nah, the left isn't silent about the flaws of Fidel's regime. Not at all. No one is perfect, and there has been no perfect system. I really struggle to understand this sort of centrist philosophy where you can just say, well, communism has never worked. Bitch, neither is capitalism. It's a abject failure in most regards, and most societies have been. There is no perfect system. The perfect system is a system you keep implementing on and keep changing and keep innovating, and you meet new challenges and you address those new challenges. In the United States, we've done abhorrent things to all sorts of minorities for hundreds of years. We've enacted campaigns of genocide, intentional and sort of unintentional, on scales that would really damn any other society. Would you go through a music tour? With the Reconstruction on the way, famed musician Woodry Guthrie and his band of almanac singers have gone on a musical tour popular throughout the country. Guthrie and his band play old classics such as Solidarity Forever and There's Power in a Union. But they have written many new songs such as This Land Is Your Land, Ease My Revolutionary Mind, Tear the Capitalists Down, and All Your Capitalists Are Bound to Lose. The tour has played to widely popular in all venues that he and his band play at. Good for you, Guthrie. Listen, you're not qualified to speak on what human nature is. None of us are qualified to speak on what human nature is. Philosophers love getting each other off, trying to talk about, this is what a man is. But nobody knows. Nobody knows. It is not a flaw to talk about a more humane system as being a better way forward. Capitalism is failing millions of people right now. Communism has failed some people, and again, I'm not a communist. And all communist states that have failed have noteworthily failed because of external influence and external action. USSR changed largely due to influence from the United States and internal corruption. I mean, the USSR is not a good example of a communist state by like any standards, unless you don't understand what communism is, and then in which case you probably think the USSR was communist, but they were Stalinist. And there's a very, very strong distinction between the two. One is an authoritarian regime, and the other is just communal ownership of the means of production. And shared ownership does not equal what Stalin did. Very different creatures. Very different creatures. Yeah. I mean, yeah, reality is often quite frustrating. I understand that. You talk about the left having constant failures for its excuses. Every political philosophy does that. The United States isn't a success, dude. Capitalism isn't a success. No society has been a widespread success. We're all failing. We've all constantly been failing. It's just ego and Yeah, ego more than anything else that keeps people from seeing that. In the United States, we like to think that we're prospering, and we're really not. You look at the quality of life that we enjoy today related to the quality of life that people enjoyed 30 years ago, and in some ways it's gotten better, but by and large, it hasn't improved significantly. This country serves the top 10% primarily, and the top 1% extraordinarily beyond that. Capitalism is bad. Capitalism is stupid. If you look at the philosophical underpinnings of capitalism, it's just ridiculous. Uh, so profit. Let's talk about profit, because profit is like the crux of this system. When early capitalist philosophers were writing about the accumulation of capital, they called it primitive accumulation, and you can read about this, and you absolutely should, because I'm going to talk about this from a Marxist critique, but by all means, have your own take on it, please. Adam Smith talked about primitive accumulation being the basis of capitalism. That the people who were wealthy got that way because they had good ideas, or because they weren't lazy, or because they found something valuable and exchanged that for people who needed it. When he talks about primitive accumulation, when he talks about basic capital, basic profit, Adam Smith discusses it in a framework of a few exceptional people rising above the lazy, by and large. That, well, they convince less intelligent people to work for them, and so they pay these less intelligent people, but then because they're smart, they keep the excess capital as profit. Okay, if you're a bit of a sociopath, that makes sense, right? But if you think about it from a more broad perspective, what that individual is doing is theft. If you have, I don't know, if you have people making something and their labor is producing the thing, they are turning a unrefined good to a refined good, for example. Let's talk about very basic methods of production here. The value being created in that system is not being created by the person who is buying the raw materials or by the person who is selling the end product. It's the person in the middle who's turning raw material into product that is creating the value. Now, this gets really complicated once we start talking about automation and once we start talking about robots and AI and things like that and taking that into consideration. But at its core, you only get profit if you are taking value out of the system somewhere. And you are taking value out of the system from the wages that you pay your workers, primarily. And that's the basic theft in the system. And by all means, absolutely read Marxist theory in, I think it's in Das Kapital, on primitive accumulation, and then read Adam Smith's argument for primitive accumulation and bounce them against each other. Yeah! After a long campaign across Mexico, we've managed to shatter Mexican defenses. Mexico City is now in our hands. We have to decide on the future of Mexico. 5%, that's all I would lose in militarily occupying Mexico? Listen. Welcome aboard, Mexico! Yeah, Das Kapital is pretty good. Communist Manifesto is okay. Now, it's worth mentioning, Marx, the dude lived in the 1800s. A lot of the nuance of modern socialist, syndicalist, communist, Maoist thought has really bloomed since then. It really come a long way. No. See, the capitalists are taking risk by buying the natural resources if there is a risk involved, right? The capitalist has a thing. The thing has a value. That value is dependent on a lot of market factors, right? But unless they paid more for that thing than it's worth, there's no risk. So unless they're being stolen from, there's no risk. Let's say the price or value of it decreases. Okay. They're not really taking on any extraordinary risk. And in an unregulated system, Smith's ideas hold up, right? Well, they don't. That you've got to realize there's some inherent logical flaws in a system that relies on the invisible hand of the market to regulate it. Yeah, in reality, the capitalists are able to procure these raw goods because of this idea of primitive accumulation. Like, how did they get the money in the first place? How did they get the wealth in the first place? That's the starting point of this divergence in a school of thought. The Smithian economics and Smithian theory suggests that the first people got a surplus of wealth, a surplus of capital, because they were smart. Because other people were stupid and other people were lazy. And I'm not paraphrasing. He literally calls people who don't make money lazy and blames laziness as the prime reason for why the rich got rich and the rest didn't. But it just doesn't hold up. People get rich out of theft and war and murder. If you look at tribal societies, early human societies, you did not accumulate stuff because you had good ideas. You accumulated stuff by taking it from other people. Yeah, I don't believe that somebody who makes an investment and opens a business should have their investment taken from them. I don't believe in state capitalism. I don't. I don't believe in that aspect of communism. I believe that they should have their investment paid out, but that in exchange for working for that person, that laborers should get a share of the board, for example, or stock, or that they should have executive decisions in how things are run. Now, unless the person is really innovating and really understands better than the workers how the operation should work, by and large, for the most part, the people on the ground, the people actually doing the job, understand the business better than the CEO. An earthquake has occurred along the southern border of the United States between California and the Mexican state of Baja California. Excuse you, game? These are both American states? I don't know what you're talking about. The epicenter is located in the town of El Centro in America. Though it's been affected in homes on the Mexican side of the border, 9 people have been killed in the earthquake and over 20 seriously injured. Damages amount to over $6 million US. Earthquake damage caused quite a bit of irrigation within the region for farms within the region. What? Within the region? Yeah, for farms within the region, a loss of irrigation within the region. Okay, this is just bad localization, which is likely to have ripple effects elsewhere. This is the first major earthquake to be recorded by a strong motion seismograph located next to a fault rupture. Well, more damaged things, but at least this time it isn't terrorism. Drop that down a little bit. Yeah, stock options are very common in industries. However, there's so many compounding things. I am gonna put in a cut here and I'm probably gonna quit streaming, and I don't mean to cut this conversation off. It's just this conversation can go on for like 8 hours. It's very, very complicated. The reason that the United States has gotten to the point where it is now. For example, just like the latest bailout bill, largely bailing out corporations, which was intended to be money that they could then pay payroll with. But what most corporations then did with the money was lay off the people they were going to lay off anyways. And they did this back in 2008, the same way, and then used the money on stock buybacks and things like that. I genuinely believe there should be a cap to how much money a single person can have, whether in liquid funds or in capital. I really do think that just makes sense. That subscription was on YouTube, I think, not on here. Or if it were on, yeah, that's a YouTube subscription. It's a different sound effect and a different animation if it's on here. Yeah, it's complicated. I don't think that we should be a socialist state in the way that the USSR was. But I do think things are horribly broken right now and not working for the vast majority of people. I think we're putting a lot of band-aids on things, and It's falling apart at the seams. But I've had fun. Thanks for hanging out. I'll probably be back again tomorrow. I definitely hope I haven't talked down at all in the duration of this conversation. I know I have a tendency to do that, and particularly when we talk about issues that impact people's lives as dramatically as healthcare, as economics, as politics, that it's easy to get fired up. And I do want this to be a I do want to host a mostly civil community here, and by and large, I think we do that. But these are trying times for all of us, and yeah, yeah. I'll put in a cut, but I'll respond to this before I do. If you're watching on YouTube, till tomorrow, toodaloo. Till then, bye bye.